Mailbag number 1. We are going to get to your mailbag questions. Welcome into the show. As of the time I am recording this, it is my 30th birthday. I am one of those weirdos who makes sure to let the world know that it is his birthday. Hey, look, you only celebrate it once a year. And it is a milestone. It is my 30th birthday. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show, because I do want to talk about the Tigers. And we are going to recap what was an interesting week of Tiger baseball, ultimately a successful week of Tiger baseball, an above 500 week of Tiger baseball. But there are still several concerns maybe that I do want to discuss over the last 7 games that we saw over this most recent week. But before we jump into that, I want to thank everybody who came by to the watch party at the Lone Goat on June 6th. Really means a lot. And whether you were able to stay for the watch party or you went to the game, just the fact that you stopped by, just to show your support and say hi, it means the world. And it was, look, I would talk to Austin about this. It was a trial run. It was an interesting little trial run. I think at some point in the future, we'll do something like this again. We're going to mold it a little bit differently to make sure that we're kind of maximizing the experience. I think trying to work out something maybe at the park might be the better way to go, just because it's such a short walk from Lone Goat to Comerica. And Friday especially, it was a Scooble night. It was a big game, series against the Cubs, series opener. Tons of people at the park, which was awesome to see. But you also had a lot of people that came by to the Lone Goat. Wonderful establishment. Shout out to Donald, the owner, and all the incredible servers there. Make sure to check that place out. I'm not just saying this because they held the watch party and everything. Awesome experience, awesome food and service and everything. So please support the Lone Goat and continue to support what we do. It means a lot. We are constantly updating CastellaniContent.com with vlogs and podcasts. That includes episodes of I'll Say This. That includes episodes of Chris and Company. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Castellani 2014. Like I said, we do have a mailbag show today, so I am going to go through your tweets and answer some of your questions. I literally pick the questions that I answer basically at random. It's kind of first come, first serve. So if you ask a question and I don't get to it, either it's a repeat of one that I already plan on answering, or it's just for the constraints of time, one that I just didn't get to. Don't take it personally. You are welcome to keep asking. But before we get to your questions, and I might even answer some questions inadvertently while talking about the Tigers here in the first segment. Let's move on. The Tigers had the Chicago week this week. They went to Wright Field to play the White Sox, where they went 2-2. Then they came back home to play the Cubs, where they won a 3-game series, 2-1. Really good series, and what could potentially be a World Series preview. I don't know. I think that the Cubs might need to add a little bit of pitching, but that offense is rock solid. And that division is theirs. I like the Reds coming into the year. I figured it would either be the Reds or the Cubs. This is going to be the Cubs division. They haven't won this thing since the COVID year in 2020. They haven't won it in a full season since 2017. So it's been a minute for them. Really good ball club and a special series. Look, obviously Tigers had the advantage in that first game of pitching Scooble. And we are going to talk all about that because that's the more intriguing series. But I want to just cover the White Sox series for a second. And I think this is a bit all-encompassing regarding not just how people responded to this entire week, but how people have responded to this entire season, which is this is uncharted territory for an entire generation of Tiger fans. Now, I know what it's like to have a good team. I know what it's like to go through summers where you're competitive and winning games and everything like that. That's all understandable. But, last year was a speed run, right? They got crazy hot in the latter part of the season, ended up making the playoffs. Sorry. But by the time, you got to 4th of July, even early August, there was really no expectation of like, oh yeah, no, this team's going to make a run. It came out all at once. And we were happy about it, right? This is the first time in probably 9 years, but especially since 2014, where they've really been something, where they've really been in contention, competing. And the reason I bring all of this up, to bring it back around, is the fact that I find the reactions to Tiger losses very interesting now, because I think that this generation, we are, and I'm not blaming the fans for this. In fact, this is natural human behavior. We are so accustomed to losing, and we're so accustomed to things going poorly, that when they lose, there's this idea in the back of our heads that the other shoe is about to drop. And I'm basing this almost entirely on people's reactions on social media, which in fairness is not necessarily a haven of common sense, and that includes people like me who tweet all the time. But, I do generally think when it comes to Detroit fans who are very smart, that is kind of the pulse of the fan base. And I noticed when the Tigers split the series against the White Sox at Wright Field earlier last week, I'm not going to say it was a meltdown on Tigers Twitter, but there was some concern. And there was some concern in the Cubs series as well. They didn't play their best baseball this week, and I don't really feel like they played their best baseball over the last 2 weeks. They found a way to scratch out wins, and that's what good teams do. But we are reaching that point in the season. We're almost 70 games in where weaknesses become more and more exposed as we get closer to the trade deadline, and those things become amplified, and they become amplified because you know that you have a special team. When you have a team that has a 7-game lead in their division this deep into a campaign or this early in a campaign, you know that they're going to be playing for something, whether it's something in the regular season, something for the postseason, what have you. And those concerns start to arise. Here's the thing. Even when this team has faltered, they, one, do as good a job as any team in baseball of bouncing back from losses this season. I mean, they are as good as any team of throwing the previous day in the trash. And I think even going back to when we were struggling, going back to when we were bad, that was something I praised AJ teams for, which is like, you never got the impression that they lost the same game twice. You always felt like they came in prepared. They came ready. If they lost, it wasn't any sort of carryover. It was just because they simply got outplayed. Now, when you have a good ball club and things are going right, the expectation is that you're going to win every game. And when you have a bad ball club and things are going wrong, the expectation is that you're going to lose every game. And this is the team right now that is part of the ascension. They are part of what will hopefully be a new, prosperous, fruitful age of Tiger baseball. And we're adjusting to it. And there are going to be those games, even those series, like the series in Chicago against the White Sox, that are relatively unimpressive. And it's so bizarre considering where I started as a content creator with these videos to claim to be the voice of reason. But you guys know, if there's ever panic mode, if it's ever panic time, like I'm the mayor of Panic City. Like I'm the guy who's going to be screaming and hollering and waving his arms. Even during this team's struggles, which keep in mind, guys, they're 19 games over 500. Like I have to recognize that if they play 500 ball the rest of the way, they're a 90-win team. That'd be their best win total since 2014. That would be good enough to make the playoffs, probably win the division at this point. I mean, that's how hot they've been to start the season. I have to throw all of that out, but that's very true. But even during this team's supposed struggles or down games, there's never been a moment where I felt like they were entering some sort of tailspin. Secondly, is that, well, I think if you were to look at some of the rosters that we had during the Dombrowski era, we could definitely say that they were more talented rosters. I think that this is a more well-rounded roster. And I think more well-rounded rosters are capable of bouncing out of slumps or bad stretches pretty quickly. There are things in this team that we can point to and we can say, hey, this is a negative or this isn't great. Like, the shortstop production isn't there right now. And I do still think there's some issues about third base. And obviously you'd love to have one more, hard throwing, heavy strikeout guy in the middle or back end of that pen. But those are minor things. Like during the heart of the Dombrowski era, this team didn't know how to run the bases. Like they weren't a good base running team. And they would lose games because of that, consistently because of that. And the bullpens always stunk. And they would start the year with a bad bullpen, and they'd end the year with a bad bullpen. And no matter how well they might have pitched through 6-7 innings, you always knew that problem could rear its ugly head. Well, there are things that you can point to and say, okay, this is a weakness. I think as a overall roster, this is a very well-rounded team with not an exact weakness to exploit. Like the starting pitching, while a little bit banged up, is really good. The bullpen, while maybe missing a piece or two, is really good. The offense, well, there's a few guys at this point that are automatic outs. Generally speaking, has come around and been pretty solid throughout the campaign. And ultimately, while there was a lot of frustrations following the White Sox series, you got to take these things on a kind of trip-by-trip basis. That was a 7-game road trip in which you were above 500. You come back home in what was an electric series against the Cubs. You win 2 out of 3, and all of a sudden you have a 4-3 above 500 weekend. And not to mention, you actually gain ground in the division. You're 7 games up. That is something that's very important as a first-place team. Like, you do have to pay attention to what the other teams are doing, and the Twins and Guardians have their flaws. And that's not to say that the Tigers don't, but they find themselves in very good standing. Look, if the moment comes where I see something that really scares me, or I see something that I feel like is genuine cause for concern that could lead to this team potentially spiraling out of control, I'm going to say it. I will be absolutely open about it. We're 67 games in, and right now I do not see that. Doesn't mean that wall isn't going to come. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be a week where maybe they go 3-4 instead of 4-3, right? But you abide by that AJ philosophy, man. Good days turn into good series, turn into good weeks, turn into good months, then all of a sudden you're having a pretty good year. That's exactly what this team has done. It can't be understated how red hot they were to start the campaign. They were 18-10 in the first month, and they really kept themselves rolling. That's been a major positive. Now, I do want to talk about the Cubs series. The Friday game was awesome. Apple TV game, which maybe that's not awesome, but Skubal shoved again. Against a really good Cubs offense, pitched into the 8th inning. You only had to use 2 pitchers on a day where your bullpen was pretty taxed. You lose the second game in a game where Montero got a bulk of the innings. You gave up a lot of home runs, and then you bounce back with a dazzling Jack Flaherty start on Sunday. Flaherty's been great now. Flaherty's been awesome his last 5 starts, sub-2 ERA. Knuckle curve has been fantastic. He's been more unpredictable with his pitch mix. Fastball velo got up to 96. Great to see. I mean, Jack Flaherty is probably going to end up becoming one of my favorite Tigers ever, just because it's when this thing started and we signed him, he came here when nobody believed in the Tigers and nobody really believed in him. And then he chose to come back here, for the Renaissance after we traded him away. And he's given him some dazzling starts over the last year plus, and it helped the Tigers clinch that series against the Cubs on Sunday. But one of the big things that we saw on Sunday that I've been critical of at points throughout the season is that we saw some big, heavy hitting from the heart of the order. The heart of the order to me, and obviously it varies depending on what lineup AJ throws out there, but for this team, when I think of who the mashers should be, who the heart of the order, the hungry heavy boys should be, the guys who are feasting, it's Riley Green, it's Kerry Carpenter, and Spencer Torkelson in any particular order, whether they're 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to say. These are the guys who, when I step up, I am most confident have the ability to leave the ballpark with one swing. And Riley, especially prior to Sunday, was going through some very serious struggles, a lot of swing and miss. I mean, there was swing and miss from him early in counts. And sometimes I wonder if I'm being too harsh on these guys. I really do, because last year, I mean, I'd given up on Torque, and I can't really I don't know if I can blame myself for that. The guy was a negative WAR player for 3 years. He's been very productive this year. And they did show it on the Comerica Park Jumbotron at the end of the game. These Torque and Green are 4 and 5, I think, in the American League in runs batted in. I mean, these guys have created runs and driven runs in all season. At the same time, when this team is in a situation where they fall behind in games, I feel like I often see these 3 up in what could be a situation where they work their way back into a ball game and they pop out, strike out, what have you. I like all 3 of these guys a lot. I do. I think they've all had very good years. I think Riley will be an all-star again. I think Torque has a shot of being an all-star, which would be fantastic to see. For all my frustrations, these are wonderful ball players, wonderful homegrown ball players. Can't be overstated how much their contributions have added to this ball club. Now, there's other homegrown guys who've contributed. Obviously, guys like Dingler who've had a wonderful season, but I think of those 3. At the same time, I compare us to some other teams in the division and the fact that when I see Jose Ramirez come to the dish against us, I hold my breath. When I see Bobby Witt Jr. come to the plate, I'm scared. Salvador Perez at his peak, don't even pitch to him, and you could go back through the generations of guys, and think of the Jim Tomes. I know he didn't play in our division, but the Nelson Cruzes of the world in the postseason, take your pick. These are wonderful hitters. I think they are the ones that have the highest potential of being that to other opponents, of being the guys who just terrify the opposition. And they're tough guys to get out. When they make hard contact, they can destroy you. When they work counts, they can destroy you. I do still think there is another level, and maybe I'm putting the expectations way too high. There was somebody on Twitter who pointed out the fact that, hey, look, if you're expecting these guys to be Jose Ramirez, you're kind of being unfair because Jose Ramirez is a Hall of Famer. Okay, maybe true. Counterpoints. Maybe we start, developing homegrown Hall of Famers. Like, who'd have thunk it? Maybe that's a possibility. We've done it with pitchers. Why can't we do it with position players? And I think that the long point I'm trying to make here is that I believe that this team offensively goes as those guys do. And look, I understand that the bottom of the order at points has had their moments with Wenzel and Z-Mac, and I brought up Dingler earlier, and Parker's going to come around at the top of the order. But, these are your clutch guys. These are your heavy hitters. And I think this series against the Cubs was a prime example of what they can be, and also at points what they are, which is on Saturday, it was a team that fell behind, and in any sort of high leverage situation where you maybe had opportunities to work your way back into the game, these guys couldn't produce. And then the next day you come out against Cade Horton, Torque with a huge two out hit, Riley with a few big hits, Carpenter with 3 hits and threw a runner out at the plate. These are your guys. And it goes back to what Scott Harris said from the beginning, which is we wanted to develop and retain young homegrown players. You've done that. You've developed good homegrown players, really good homegrown players. If they become great, then I will start thinking about this team and this offense maybe being one that could do a lot more than just win the division and make the playoffs. I could be thinking about them as a team that maybe even wins the whole thing. They're still doing phenomenal. They're still having a wonderful season, but I hold those 3 in particular in a higher regard to anybody else. And for that reason, it probably will seem like I'm overly critical of them, but I'm here to push people beyond what's expected of them, to quote Fletcher from Whiplash. But overall, look, Tigers are in a great place. They got an off day, and then they go to Baltimore on Tuesday. See what happens. Baltimore's obviously had a miserable season, but there are still some pretty good hitters in that offense. You do have Skubal going for one of those days, which is obviously going to be fantastic. And hopefully will be a victory. I think that this applies, and AJ said it applies for both the good teams the Tigers play and the bad teams the Tigers play. I don't really care who we play. I think that when it comes to scheduling in baseball, we make way too big a deal out of that, where we say, ooh, weak team coming in, that should be a sweep. Ooh, good team coming in. Oh, maybe we'll lose 2 out of 3. Every one of these teams is a professional ball club. Okay, every one of these teams has pride. I know that we're pointing and laughing at the Rockies and how bad they are. Rockies have won 12 games, right? And I know 12 at this point in the season is not much, right? But you get my point. Like the people that freaking out as if we lost to a high school team when we played the White Sox. These guys are in the major leagues for a reason, and they're going to grind out at bats because they play with pride just like everybody else does. And if you have a day where you don't pitch well and some of your hitters aren't seeing the ball well, you can lose to anybody. Now, you can also beat anybody, and I think that that's where this team is at. There's no team, I think, in Major League Baseball right now that is invincible against the Tigers. In the early part of the season, I would have said the Dodgers, but all the Dodgers pitchers are injured, and we have great pitching. So we pitch well in a 5-game series against Dodgers, 7-game series. Who knows what can happen? All right, we're getting into hypotheticals going way down the road here. Let's jump ahead to our mailbag, and I appreciate Austin adding the graphics for this one. Like I said, I'm going to get to these pretty much at random. My guess is most of these are probably Tigers related, but when we do a mailbag episode, you are welcome to ask about whatever you want. But of course, the main goal of this show is to be a Detroit/Michigan based sports show. So let's jump right to the questions, and this leads back to something that I talked about a little bit earlier in the episode. This is from @BRad @WhiskeyBrad. He asks, is there a point when we should get concerned about Riley Green's Ks in the middle of the order? My answer to that is yes and no. I think that we focus a little bit too much on the strikeouts as opposed to just the overall lack of production. The fact is, we can moan and complain all we want about where the world is at and how hitters are taught nowadays. But the fact is, pitchers are better than they've ever been, and hitters swing harder than they've ever swung. And the idea is to lift the ball. The idea is to hit for power, and that will lead to harder contact. That will lead to more extra base pop and home runs, but that will also lead to more strikeouts. When it comes to Riley, to me, a ground ball out and a pop out and a strikeout are all cut from the same cloth. Now, I understand good things happen. You put the ball in play, but in general, we live in more of a true outcomes league than we ever have in the past. It's changed a little bit now that we have, the stolen base rule and stuff like that. But for the most part, this is the stuff that we look at. So does it concern me? The peaks and valleys of Riley Green concern me more than the strikeouts do, because when we see a locked in Riley Green, it's like, in Super Mario Brothers where you take, what was it? I should know this. I've played it a million times. The magic mushroom, and you grow like a million sizes, and he looks like he's 8 feet tall out there, just dominating every pitcher. And then he'll have these stretches where he's behind on 92-mile-per-hour heaters. Now, he is only 24 years old, and I do have to bring that up, but I think for him to be a consistent star, maybe even MVP caliber talent, it's avoiding those stretches where he looks a little bit lost. Now, he'll get it back, and he'll probably make up for it in some capacity, but to me, the scariest hitters are often the most consistent ones, and we haven't quite seen Riley get to that level quite yet, but we very much could. So it's not so much the strikeouts as much as I just want to see the production be more consistent. The next one, this comes from Matt Romanowski at the Voice of Romo. Given that the Tigers can buy at the deadline, who will be the the pieces you think they will be trading away to bring over a key acquisition. Now, I get asked about the trade deadline every day. It's a weird thing because the second the offseason begins, I get asked who we're going to sign. And then the second after opening day, I get asked what we're going to do at the deadline. Now, obviously, the picture has become much more clear. The Tigers, in some capacity, will be buyers at the deadline. At worst, and I would be shocked if this happens, at worst, they're going to stand pat. Okay, they will not be selling off assets like they've done every year, basically for the last decade, sans maybe 2016. This is not going to be some fire sale and nothing like that. This team is here to stay. In terms of who could get traded away, I think that that's an interesting question. I think that the world of the trade deadline in Major League Baseball has changed a lot. I think that trade deadlines from like 2005 to 2015-16 were the most fascinating because teams were more than willing, and the Tigers were a prime example of this, to dump every piece of their farm system just to get a few players that they felt like could help them get over the top. I think that things have changed. I think prospects are more valued than they've ever been. I think farm systems are more valued than they've ever been. And I say that meaning that I think trade deadlines are not going to be as interesting as they've been in the past. I could be wrong about that. And every few years, we will get a situation like Juan Soto several years back when he was 23 years old, traded by the Nationals and sent to San Diego. But I think with Detroit, what we're kind of used to, or at least people that grew up with me are used to, is those Dombrowski heavy punches where you go out and get the top tier starting pitcher, the heavy hitter. I don't think it's going to happen. I think what will happen is this team will add, but they'll add kind of in small doses. I think that a bullpen piece, there's always bullpen arms available. I think the position right now that you got to at least take a look at is shortstop. Trey Sweeney has been really struggling for the last month or so. Hobby has completely fallen off ever since that monster game against the Red Sox, and really the first good month and a half of the season that he had. That's something to look at. In terms of who they could trade away, that's where it gets tough, because I don't see them trading any of the top dogs. No McGonigal, no Clark, no Jaden Ham, no Hao-Yu Lee. I mean, I think that they are so proud of and so of the belief that this farm system is something that can build a consistent winner here, that I don't think they're necessarily going to trade any of those key pieces. I think a piece right now that is incredibly vulnerable just because he hasn't done anything at the big league level, but he hasn't been bad long enough to be considered damaged goods is Jace Young. Jace Young was the last Al Avila draft pick, so he is not a part of the Scott Harris system. That's why even I've had people recommend, what about trading Justin Henry Malloy to acquire a piece? I don't think they'll do that because I think Harris still believes in him. I mean, he was a guy that the Tigers acquired. That was a Scott Harris move. They traded Joe Jimenez for him. I don't think his time here is even close to done. I think someone like Jace Young could be more on the outside looking in. I don't see anybody from the major league roster necessarily getting shipped. But yeah, I'd say he's probably the most likely candidate. And then when it comes to acquiring relief pitching, look, you could throw in a relief pitcher that you have somewhere on the system. You don't have to give up a whole lot for those guys. I mean, last year the Tigers traded Andrew Chafin and Carson Kelly, and they got Chase Lee back, who's been a completely acceptable piece for the Tigers bullpen so far in 2025. So I don't think that it will be anything earth-shattering. This is a question I also get all the time. This is from Narrative Pusher at 24/7 Rumor King. Confidence that the Skubal extension gets done 0 to 100. I'm going to put it right now at 49%. And that maybe seems low. And I guess it is. I mean, it's under, that basically means I don't think they re-sign him. But my confidence is bizarrely growing in this case, just because Skubal's dominance is continuing to expand and grow. He's literally getting better as a pitcher. And with that, I think the attachment that the fan base has to him and that he has to the fan base in the city is growing. My theory about this from the beginning has been, I think, regardless of how the next 2 years go, and I mean, based on what we're seeing, he's probably going to win at least one more Cy Young here. He will hit free agency and in classic Scott Boras fashion will go to the highest bidder. For some reason, and maybe this is the fan in me, maybe this is me speaking with my heart, I think there's more of a possibility of Chris Ilitch, metaphorically speaking, putting his nuts on the table and giving someone out to Skubal, just because there's just something different about him as a player and the importance that he has on this organization, and also the heartbreak that would come with losing him. And I think that if you don't pay Skubal, and this is the thing I'm going to bring up here, okay, because this is very important what I'm about to say. Let's say they offer Skubal $300 million and he ends up taking $400 million from somewhere else. That stinks, right? I want Tarek here, but I need you spending the money you would have given him on 1, 2, or 3 other pieces to continue to make your team better. That's a big thing that we see in Major League Baseball all the time. The big one was when the Nationals lost Bryce Harper. The next season, they won the World Series, and people went, oh, I guess the Nationals were better without Bryce. No, it's not that they were better without Bryce. They offered Bryce a ton of money. The problem is after they turned him down, they were able to give that money to other pieces that helped them win the World Championship in 2019. Another prime example of that was this year with the Yankees, who were obviously in first place. They lose Juan Soto. He doesn't take their offer, so they go out, they trade for Bellinger, they add Goldschmidt, they add Devin Williams in relief, who obviously has been inconsistent, but is still, a piece, was still considered to be a part of a good offseason for them. So I'm putting my confidence at that 49, so just below half. But I do have greater confidence that that money will be spent elsewhere if Skubal decides that he wants to go somewhere else. At the same time, simplest solution, Occam's razor, just go out and re-sign Tarek Skubal, and everyone is happy. This is from Bryant Hanco. He at Hoodie Hanco 32. Gleyber's on a 1-year deal. What are the chances we re-sign him this offseason, or does he go get a bigger deal somewhere else? I think that this is a question I'll have a more clearer picture of answering at some point once we get deeper into the campaign. I think if Gleyber keeps this up, and we're talking about a guy with somewhere between a 770 and 800 OPS for the remainder of the season, I think at that point he would be more likely to test the free agent waters again and get a multi-year contract from a team. And more than multi, I'm talking 3, 4, 5-year contract. I mean, Gleyber Torres has had a very good career and has been a very good offensive player. I think that there's been a lot of peaks and valleys. He had that monster season in 2019 where he hit a bunch of home runs and people thought that, he had potential to be this 40 home run guy. He's not that, but he's a very good hitter. And he's been a huge piece for this team. If the numbers fall off a little bit, I could see the Tigers doing something almost similar to what happened with Flaherty, where it's like, hey, we're not willing to give you those 5 years, but we'll bring you back on a 2-year deal with an opt-out. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And one guy that I just brought up a minute ago, but I'll bring up another one as well, is Hao-Yu Lee. I think that between Hao-Yu Lee and Jace Young, the idea is that there's a second baseman of the future in there. Now, the other thing, what do you do with Cole Keith? Because if Torkelson's here to stay, that means second base or third base is potentially Colt Keith's spot. So I think that there are some pieces here within the system that the organization is thinking can replace Gleyber at some point. If you put a gun to my head and said, will Gleyber Torres be a Tiger next year? My answer would be no. But it wouldn't shock me if there's not at least some attempt to make a move to go out and re-sign Gleyber Torres. It seems like he's very comfortable here. This is from Jammerman10 at Jammerman101 on the Twittersphere. What are your thoughts on Hao-Yu Lee if he comes back strong from injury? Well, I'm choosing this at random, but Hao-Yu Lee, for people who don't remember, I should have brought this up earlier, was a middle infielder acquired in the Michael Lorenzen deal back in 2023, currently in AAA, probably on pace to make his major league debut at some point this season. Could be a September call up. Pretty solid pop down in the minor leagues. Good walk rate. My thoughts on him at this point are, when they feel like he's ready, let's give him a shot. I feel that way with every one of these prospects at this point. I think the Tigers are in a very good place where we're not just stuck waiting for young guys to get called up. The major league roster is doing very well. But look, he got, I believe, hit in the head by a pitch. Hopefully, he can come back and be just fine. Based on the highlights that I've seen, he's a very confident player. He's the kind of player Scott Harris wants, a guy who's got a good feel for the strike zone, somebody that if he hits here could really be a lot of fun. I don't foresee him being some super well-rounded 5-WAR, 5-tool player, but I think a guy that is a bottom half of the order guy that can hit for pop and put together a good at-bat is somebody that could absolutely stay here. And I think that his production, not just in the minor leagues, but what he does when he gets called up to the major leagues, is going to have a big impact on what the Tigers decide to do going forward at both second and third base. I think that he can have a legit impact on this team. Basically, everything else is about the trade deadline, so I'll answer this final question here. This is from Ty at Tyler J2525. If MLB front offices were power ranked, where do you think the Tigers would come in? That's such an interesting question because the Tigers are still in ascension mode right now, meaning that everything's going great and you want to give them their flowers. Hey, they got the best record in baseball. Everyone's doing a great job. But, and this isn't really that fault of Scott Harris. This is only, his third year here. They haven't won anything yet, technically. They won a playoff series last year, so that's something, right? I guess technically. But it's not like the Dodgers or the Yankees, teams that have won World Series, made it to World Series. It's not even the Mets, who've the last few years have been successful, made it to the NLCS a year ago, signed Juan Soto. I think right now I am comfortably putting them at the bottom part of the top 10. I can't put them ahead of a team like the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Mets or even the Phillies, some of these teams that have made deep runs recently. I think that they can push their way into the top 5 with, one, a solid trade deadline this year, and two, how they spend their money over the next offseason. Because whether it's bringing in veterans that they feel like can make the team better or using that money for an extension of some of their good young talent, I think the player development right now is absolutely elite. I think it is as good as it has ever been in my lifetime. But player development only gets you so far. It is the retaining of that young talent and also the acquiring of talent around them to kind of supplement what you already have. That's what makes a lot of front offices really great. A team that does it right. I think back to the Astros, right? When they had those young guys and Altuve and Springer, Bregman and Correa. Well, what they did was they traded for Verlander and they added some veteran pieces and they got guys like Josh Reddick. And then of course you trade for Garrett Cole, and all of a sudden you have this really complete roster. A team that's done it poorly is one like the Orioles, where you looked at their young core and say, man, these guys are insanely talented. They didn't do anything after that after Burns left in free agency to build around them. And now you have a team that's been really struggling over, in this most recent season. They are going to have to add talent in free agency in some capacity. When they do that, I could see this becoming a front office that we look at as one of the best in the sport, because I think the most important part, which is the development of their young players, I think they've got that down pat. I'm very happy with where they're at in terms of player development under Scott Harris. All right. My mouth is dry. That will do it for today's episode. We will be back on Wednesday. Natalie Kerwin will be joining the program of FanDuel Sports. You've seen her all over. You've seen her do Tiger stuff. You've seen her do Piston stuff. We will be asking all about her experiences covering these Detroit sports teams. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani 2014. You can find me on TikTok. You can find us on all those platforms, Instagram, everything, and on CastellaniContent.com, which is getting updated every day. If you want to find every Tiger video that we've done this season, you can find it all archived on there. I am very, very proud of what we've done and what we're doing. We've grown a lot. And all I can ask of you guys is just to continue to show your support and share and like and subscribe, and let people know the place that we're at. Not the place we were, not the place we've been, the place we are now. Because I think we're in a headspace where we can really do something special, and we're going to continue to grind and continue to grow. And this most recent weekend was a prime example of why we feel the support we feel, and how important it is to me and Austin that we can make you guys proud. So thank you all for what you continue to do for my life, and I speak for Austin as well. We will be back with a Chris and Company episode later this week. Maybe a few vlogs coming down the corner, who knows? But I'll talk to you again real soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.